So today I'm going to talk to you all about JavaScript.
I think the screen got moved down.
I was going to say, why do I have a black line here?
It's because it
Just a projector.
the project or the
Yeah, it's just have a kill track probably just kicked in or something. A line item center.
Yeah, right? If only life was that easy.
No, actually it's easier to move it than to try to flex it.
that is true.
That is good enough for now.
Yeah, it's just
Just hold it like that.
Yeah, just
You need something right there?
Yeah.
Stay just like that flex.
Nope, no, it's something up.
Just flex.
Yeah.
You flex.
Move. Stop.
You can
Stay right there. I want to
flex.
stay flexed. Oh, I don't know.
That is-
Make
that
it
is
better.
good.
Alright.
So today we're going to talk about JavaScript. I am recording this as well. And there are a couple of key concepts I want to talk about before we actually see the code. So,
I don't want to hit anything.
Oh.
there you go. So with JavaScript, who's heard of JavaScript before? I mean, I'm sure we all have because we've been talking about like all morning.
I thought it was Java. I thought it was the same. JavaScript.
Yeah, So Java is to JavaScript what car is to carpet. It's completely different.
Oh, okay. Nothing.
So yeah, it's nothing. I just saw that analogy last week and that just tickled me. I had to say it. So a few of you have heard of Java. So JavaScript is a programming language that we use to write scripts inside of the browser, primarily. It was made whenever Netscape browser was a thing, way back in like the 90s. And it was originally called ECMAScript. Until marketing geniuses came along and said, Java's pretty cool right now. Let's name it JavaScript to get people on board. Hence JavaScript. So JavaScript, what is it? First off, it is a scripting language that enables you to create dynamically updating content, control multimedia, animate images, and pretty much everything else. Pretty much everything. So what this means is that so far our websites have been HTML and CSS, right? Pretty static, pretty boring, pretty simple, pretty easy, pretty beautiful. Pretty. But we know the web is more dynamic than just simple static sites. This is where JavaScript comes into play. We write lines of code in a script file, and we include that script file on the page the same way that we include the CSS. So remember how we include the CSS? It's a pointer to that file. Well, we're going to include JavaScript in the exact same way. It's just a pointer to a file. And then once the browser sees that file, it's going to go in and it's going to run that code. And it's going to run that code in a sequential order. So when I say sequential, that is from a top-down order. You notice that sequential is in quotes, right? Because evaluating and running are two different things. Whenever the browser loads up the script, it's going to evaluate it, and then it's going to run it only at certain times. Only whenever it's told to run it. And we'll get to what that means in about 10 minutes. So it's going to line up, it's going to run our code one by one, and those lines of code form something called an algorithm. Who's heard of that term before? Yeah, what is an algorithm?
Formula. Yes.
What is it, Michael?
Formula.
A formula, what else?
A series of steps.
Series of steps, yes. It's a series of steps or a formula that we take to solve a problem. Now those problems could be as trivial as adding a button to our page, or it could be as complex as saying finding the best route between point A and point B. All those are still algorithms, just to different degrees. So the first part of the language that we need to kind of talk about and understand, that's kind of a key to algorithms and programming languages, is variables. So variable, and I'm sure you all can read. Variables. Oh, wow. This is what I was making. That's why we had to start 5 minutes later, because I was almost done with it. So there might be some typos here. A variable is a value that can change depending on conditions or information passed around. Pretty much that means that we're taking a chunk of memory, a chunk of a space, and we're storing a value there for later. That way we can use it inside of our algorithms and put it on the page eventually, possibly. So what does that look like? Can you all see that in the back? Can you all read this stuff? Good. So a variable in JavaScript takes one of three forms. The first one should be your default. This is what you kind of default to in making a new variable. Const. And this is the syntax for it. What's syntax again?
Structure, the way it's written.
Yes, it's the structure, the way it's written. It's the grammar of the language. So we have our first kind of peek at what JavaScript is right here. So here we're creating a new variable. We're using a keyword called const, which is short for constant. We're giving it a name, in this case x, and we're giving it a value, 5. So that is the typical way that you're going to be creating variables. You're going to say const, name it, equals some value. So what's special about this const is that this constant value cannot be changed. So I cannot change it later, which is fine, which is good.
So the x and the 5, that x is the variable.
Yep.
And 5 is a value, just a given value that you're going to.
Yep. And that value can be anything, pretty much anything. And here it's what's called a number. Then the second one is const first name equals Mark. The value is a string. It's just chunks of letters. And it's constant and it's never changing. And first name, you notice that there's no spaces, right? It's all one word. Variable names cannot have spaces inside of them. They can have underscores, hyphens, numbers, capital letters, and everything like that, but no spaces. There's a few other rules, but generally no spaces. This is a way of writing multiple words called camel case. Camel case is very popular inside of JavaScript. You may have heard of like snake case or something like that if you're coming from a different language, or Pascal case. But camel case, and all camel case is that it says that the first word is lowercase, and every other word after it is the uppercase. So down here, let day of week equals Monday. You see that it says day of week. We do that for our readability. We want our variable names to be readable and our variable names to be descriptive. Const x isn't really descriptive, right? We don't know what x is. It's just a thing. But first name, kind of get a good guess what first name is, right? That's a meaningful name. So in the third line, let day of week, we have a new way to declare variables, let. So const values cannot change. Let values can change. So I can go and change the value of day of week later. So like tomorrow, day of week was going to equal Tuesday. Again, let number of coffee cups was 1. So the third way in JavaScript is the old-fashioned way. It's the way that's not really encouraged anymore, but you will see it. So I want to make you aware of it. var name, whatever it is, var not this equals hello. That acts a lot like let, but it does some other crazy stuff in the background. Don't use var. You can replace var with let and your code will still work. There's a longer story of why you shouldn't use var, which we'll get to over the next couple days. But for right now, just don't use var. You should always default to const. So in JavaScript, we have a typing system, sort of. So when I say typing system, it means that values have a type to it. So when I say values have a type, the number 5 has a type of number. The value Dewey has a type of a string. It's just what that is. What added this to this later, but in general, JavaScript is a dynamically typed language. So what do you think that means? A dynamically typed language. Chris?
You don't have to say what your data type is before you make it.
Great. We don't have to worry about casting. We don't have to worry about what our data type is. The kind of JavaScript takes that on that responsibility for us and trusts us as a developer to know what we're doing. So see how we have two variables here, a number and a string? They're both defined the exact same way. Const name equals value. It doesn't care what type it is. We as developers might later down the road, but JavaScript doesn't.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Depends on who you ask.
That it trusts us rather than the defining the variable.
It literally depends on who you ask. This is actually a huge debate in the developer community, dynamic versus static typing. It has its perks because on one hand, like the language is getting out of my way and I'm just doing what I want to do, which is good, which is cool, which is nice. But it allows me it gives me enough rope to hang myself. So it's that idea like I can do really clever and really cool things with it. I can also do really stupid and really bad things with it. So it's kind of like playing with fire. On the other side, a more statically and more structured language, like .NET or Java or Go or Golang or something like that, I care about the types. The code is more in your way, but it kind of double checks you as you go. Some people like that, some people don't. Me personally, it's like what day of the week. Sometimes I like having that like type system in my face, but sometimes I like being like, you know what, I just want to code and create today and not worry about types. So, sure, yeah, it depends. Okay. So in JavaScript, in JS, you can do basic math, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. You can do it on numbers, you can do it on strings, you can do it on anything. How it acts will be different sometimes. Just kind of look at them real fast. So we can define two values, we can add them together, we can subtract them. Define two strings, we can add strings together. That's something called concatenation. Just joining two strings together, just bump them together. So this full name will be Sherlock Holmes. Nothing too crazy, right? I try not to insult your intelligence by saying like this is addition and stuff like that. I assume we can add.
10 plus 5 is 15.
Okay. What? All right. Thank you. So we've seen some concepts, some ideas. Let's kind of see where the tire meets the road here. So if I head on over here, go to my PowerShell. We're going to use our good friend AppApp. Intro to JS. And now we've graduated from alpha to beta. Woo woo.
Are we in unit 2?
What?
You gotta put beta first.
No. Pause.
Never mind.
Yeah. I'm doing things real fast. Node. Don't know why I have to do this every single time.
Never mind.
Node version manager.
Yeah. That'll do it. Yeah, Node version manager. For some reason, my laptop likes to default to an old version of Node. Have to figure out why. So we're going to name this Intro to JavaScript. Now, if we look at the files that it's creating a lot of the same files for us, but it's adding a new one, main.js. This is that scripting file that's going to be pointed to by our HTML site. Any questions so far? Any thoughts, comments?
Alpha just means HTML, CSS. Beta will add JS to those other two.
Any documentation on ABAP? That we can reference it, is it? Just to move around.
Yeah, there's it's a Git repository.
Okay.
It's on GitHub. I think it's under Jason's account.
Quick question.
Yeah.
In terms of constants, I thought the naming of the variable was always capital case, all uppercase.
So that's a very, very good point. So what V is alluding to, I'm going to stove it up somewhere, is that if we ever have a constant like this, is should the constants be all uppercase? And that's a maybe. Maybe.
Maybe?
A maybe, yeah. It's more like it depends on where they're being used. So if it's a global constant, then yes, they should be all capitalized. If it's a local constant, then it should be matching whatever scope it's in. And what you're alluding to is something called a style guide. So in JavaScript, there's a lot of, it's very unopinionated. So what that means is that it allows you, the developer, to decide a lot of things for you. So like, should your constants be all uppercase or not? The style guides that we're going to follow and kind of look at is global, like program-wide constants, configuration values of that should be uppercase. But since const has come in and kind of become the new norm, like you should make all your variables constant unless you know you're going to change them later, that kind of like mentality has shifted from constants all the time being capitalized to just global-wide constants being capitalized. If some things in that sentence didn't make sense to you, that's okay. Give it about an hour and a half. This is a lot, I know. But we're good. We're good. So, over here, I'm going to open up. Ooh, whoopsies. There we go. That's slightly better. So same file structure as before. On the index HTML, you'll notice that we now have the script tag at the bottom of the page. So typically CSS files are included in the head because you want to load those first, because you want the user to see it to be styled. And then because of performance and everything like that, we want to put our script tags at the very bottom. So they should be the last thing right before the bottom. That way all your content's loaded, all of your CSS is loaded, so your page is styled, and then you add functionality to it.
The script is going to always go at the bottom of the button.
Yep, script tags are always at the bottom.
Unless.
What?
Unless.
There is an unless there, but we're not going to worry about that today. So for today, script tags go at the bottom. So let's check out this main.js file. And I'm going to just delete what's here for right now, and we can put it on a pad. So this is where we're going to write our JavaScript. So let's define a few variables real fast. Const first name equals Winnie. Const last name equals the poo. Why do I have my red squiggles here? Oh. So these red squiggles, you see red and typically like, oh my god, what's going on, right? That is usually bad. This is something called ESLint, linter errors. Linter errors are just polite suggestions to make your code better.
Make it
Better. But what I mean by better, cleaner, easier to read, faster, more team compliant. Linters is just a set of rules that your developer team has set up that you follow.
linter.
Linter. linter.
So is the linter that was at that, is that in-house?
Yep, that's one that we're using. It is in this ESLint following standard JavaScript rules.
Oh, okay.
But anyways, so it's yelling at me for a couple reasons. First, it's saying that first and last name are unused. So it's like, wait a minute, you defined a variable, but you're not using it. That's crazy talk. It's like you asking for a burger and then not eating it. Like, what are you doing? It's also yelling at me because strings must be in single quotes. Instead of double quotes. And also no semicolons.
Wait, why?
Right, I just changed two things that look so trivial, right? Semicolons and double quotes, single quotes. So in JavaScript, let's talk about the single and double quotes. It doesn't matter which ones you use, as long as they match. Our linter will say use single quotes, and that's okay. Semicolons are also optional in JavaScript. Yeah, right? Optional semicolons. So a semicolon in JavaScript denotes a line of code. But browsers and interpreters and compilers and transpilers and any other ilers I can think of will automatically detect when a line ends and insert a semicolon for you. So you don't have to put them in yourself. How does that make y'all feel?
Let's dive in.
It's less typing, right? It's awesome. My code is cleaner, there's less junk in it. I'm more dependent on how it's interpreted. Chris, you were kind of surprised there.
Well, no, I'm just making funny things just because so used to putting semicolons.
So
Me too. I actually like semicolons.
Yeah, me too.
So semicolons fix a certain suite of bugs, like a subset of weird edge cases in JavaScript. And it's one of those things like IDEs that developers are fiercely opinionated about. And where they land is like crazy. People butt heads like semicolons or no semicolons.
if you put them there,
If you put them there, you're just going to get a linter warning and that's it.
So I've done a little JavaScript before, and when I learned, it just said you don't need them, but you should just put them anyway,
Yeah.
just in case.
Yeah, the standard we're using, standard JS, standard JavaScript, says single quotes and no semicolons. Feel free to change that if you want to something else. I probably will in a couple of days because I like double quotes and I like semicolons.
Like single quotes, no shift.
Unbelievable.
No shift.
Just to be sure,
No shift.
there is no difference between a character and a string in JavaScript.
Correct. So what V is talking about is a character and a string. Those are data types from other languages. A string is a collection of characters. A character is just one character. Certain languages have differentiators and care. JavaScript doesn't. That's part of its dynamic typing, like it doesn't care.
Would it be like if you type Y or N for yes or no, as if you have to type the whole word yes
Correct.
and no?
Yep.
Is that
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So the Y and the N would be characters, but yes and no would be strings.
This might be a sneak peek in what you're about to talk about, but if you are looping through a string, is it just going to say if there's more than two characters, then treat it as a string? If not, then just treat it as a string.
It always just treats it as a string. The
Okay.
character type just doesn't exist here.
Same amount of memory speaking for each.
Yep. Yeah. So V mentioned memory, which is closer to the hardware than what JavaScript is. JavaScript is a very high-level language versus a low-level language like C or C++ or Java. So the high versus low is all relative to how close the language is to the user. So JavaScript is more to the user being the developer, versus C, which is closer to the hardware, so it's further away, it's a lower level. So we've defined a few things. Let's print these out on the page somewhere, and then we'll take a quick break. Does that sound good? So the first thing that we need to be kind of familiar with in JavaScript is something called the console. So I'm going to console.log first name and console.log last name. So this will print out to the console Winnie, and then it'll print out the poop. Where is this console, right?
That too.
Let's head over to our page. Let's start something up. So as V pointed out, last week we pretty much lived in the elements section, right? This is where we did all of our development. This is where everything kind of happened. Well, today we're going to expand our horizons a little bit and go over to the console. So this console is something we use to print out stuff in JavaScript. This is good for development and debugging. You should never put your users here. But this is where we're going to be printing out a whole bunch of stuff later on, just to kind of get used to JavaScript. And then we'll start interacting with what's called the DOM after the break. How are we feeling?
Well,
Yeah. So to sum up what happened, we have our HTML file pointed to a JavaScript file. That JavaScript file was included, loaded with this page, and then it ran those 4 commands in top to bottom order. So our algorithm here was define a constant called Winnie, define a constant called the poo, print out first name, and print out last name.
so the console is just for you, the developer, to
Yep.
get it,
See what it's
see
doing.
what happens.
Exactly.
Code.
Yep.
Okay.
It's like when we were in CSS and you moved over and like, oh, yep, it aligned it, or up, didn't do anything.
Exactly.
I can strike off.
Yep.
Makes no difference.
And the secret is that this is actually a JavaScript REPL. It's a JavaScript REPL. You know how we talked about the REPL last week with the terminal being a REPL?
Oh, the reps.
Yeah, we talked about the elements kind of being like a REPL for CSS. This is now a REPL for JavaScript, so I can run JavaScript commands right here. We'll dive into that later. Just kind of a nice little preview. All right, so it is 10:45. Let's give ourselves a 15-minute break, kind of stretch our minds, kind of stretch ourselves. Come back at 11 o'clock. We'll talk about the DOM.